Welcome to the Underground Dhamma podcast, episode 6, a special episode with a special host. And first of all, my name is Juan, and I am joined here with Joana. Hello, Joana.
Hi.
Yes, today we have a special guest, and I'll let Joana introduce him.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to introduce to you to our special guest, Bhante Sanathavihari Bhikkhu. He is a Mexican-American Theravada Buddhist monk and an Air Force veteran whose birth name is Ricardo Ortega. He is 36 years of age and was born in Los Angeles, California. He has a bachelor's in religion from the American Military University, and he is currently in his second year of marriage family therapist studies at Mount St. Mary's University, Los Angeles. He is also a research assistant investigating systems of power and abuse and the exploitation of legal systems as a function of escalating post-separation abuse among females with high conflict partners. After 9 years and 3 deployments, he was ordained at the age of 30 as a novice in the Theravada tradition in 2015 at Sarathchandra Buddhist Center. In 2018, he received higher ordination at Maharagama Bhikkhu Training Center in Sri Lanka under the Amarapura Nikaya fraternity. Today, Bhante Sanathavihari is the leader of Casa de Bhavana, a non-sectarian Buddhist organization devoted to sharing Buddhist teachings and the practice of meditation in Spanish in the U.S., Latin America, and in Spain. And here he is.
Hello, everyone out there. Hello, Juan. Hello, Joana. Thank you for inviting me. I knew it was inevitable before I had to come on here. So I was trying to avoid it, but they tricked me with lunch. So the Buddha said when the monks are offered lunch, they have to give a talk. So here I am.
Yes, that's right. It was inevitable like Thanos. And yes, we did plan on springing this on him while we were feeding him. So yes, thank you, Bhante, for coming on here. And you have been a big part of our Dhamma life. And, you were there from the beginning, from when I got to the temple. And you were also there for when Joana came. And, so we knew you were going to be on this podcast, and we know that it's not going to be your only appearance, your honorary co-host. But I think one of the unique things about you, Bhante, is that you are starting a sort of a revolution in the Latino community. Right now in the U.S., there's a lot of Western Buddhism. A lot of people, Westerners, are picking up Buddhism. But when we look at the South American countries and the other Spanish-speaking countries in the world, like Spain, Buddhism's pretty new. And I think we've joked that Buddhism is kind of like a Wild West out there, with no sheriff, no marshals out there teaching the true Dhamma. But so you're kind of like a Wyatt Earp of Buddhism. And I just want you to please describe to us what it is you're doing in the Spanish community.
Okay, no pressure, right? Yeah. So actually, I didn't have any plans to do this. Like, my Spanish was like, okay, and when I became a monk, I thought about just renouncing everything. I just wanted to reach Nibbana. When you become a monk, that's one of the things you say, that you're doing this because you want freedom from suffering. You want to obtain Nibbana. But, our local center, Sarathchandra Buddhist Center, has a lot of Latinos, a lot of Spanish-speaking people. They go there. So I found myself, from time to time explaining things in Spanish. And then I made like some video, just like a very simple video about like Buddhism, and one about chanting or something, like how to take refuge. And some man from like Catalonia in Spain reached out to me. And he says that he was having problems like learning Dhamma and everything. So after some time, he wanted us to do like a meditation group online, to start a group. And I didn't want to do it, to be honest. Like, I just wanted to do my own thing and just meditate and study. And I wanted to get away from it all. But he convinced me, I felt like kind of like bad for saying no. So I was like, all right, but you do all the work, right? You set it up and I'll just show up there. I'll just be there. I just work here. So he did it. And in the beginning, we just called it Latino Theravada Meditación Grupal Online. So that, like a year and a half later or 2 years later, is what became Casa de Bhavana. And people started joining at the same time. He inspired me to start a YouTube channel, which I already had, but I didn't have it named or anything. And I called it Monja en la Modernidad, which means monk in modernity. So it was really through like YouTube that I started getting a lot of people's attention. And I noticed the situation like in Latin America, as you said, it's like the Wild West, right? But I felt more like Caine, you know, in Kung Fu in the Wild West. Um, uh, so yeah, that's what's going on. And then eventually when I made my way down to Mexico, I started doing meditation retreats. People started telling me that, you know, Buddhism in Latin America is only for rich people, para los elites, ¿verdad? Like people who are elite people. And I did some research and I was like, wow, it is like, it's expensive to be a Buddhist in Latin America, or to participate in Buddhist activities and retreats, especially. It's out of people's normal economic reach. Oh, so that's what really got me more motivated. So I started taking all the Sri Lankan monks to Mexico. So far, I've taken 3 Sri Lankan monks, including my teacher, Bhante Kolita, Bhante Sriniwasa. And I took another monk who's also from our group called Bhante Damagaru. So yeah, and I ended up going to Spain also, doing a retreat over there at inside of a Catholic nunnery, which was very interesting. And there was a young nun, novice nun there, who was learning. She was from India. You know, she saw me in the robe, so she thought maybe I knew some Hindi or something. I was like, no, I don't know any Hindi. I can't speak. And we talked a little bit just about like Indian, within the religion and practices within the Indian context. And then little by little, like people started finding me and like they started interviewing me for like different papers and stuff like that, and magazines and things like that. And I think it's really been like this last like couple months before the pandemic till now, where it's like really, really taken off, you know, where we've reached critical mass. And I'm like, oh, well, this is like too much. This is why I didn't want to do it. But yeah, so that's really what I'm doing. I mean, I could talk about in detail about things if you have any questions, any particular questions about anything that I'm doing, but that's like a brief summary of the last, since 2017 till now is when we first started our first meditation online. And yeah, that's what we've been doing.
Bhante, I'm just curious, like, what do you feel really started your path into developing your spirituality?
So I joke about this a lot, and especially in the beginning when I first became a monk, you know, I was kind of like, I just jabbing at myself, at my own insecurities at that time, about like how, you know, most people, when they come to meditation or religion, or they come to a Buddhist temple, or they seek spirituality, there's some problem in their life or some difficulty, right? Something's going on. And usually it's horrible stories, you know, like as a monk, and even before I was a monk, I'd hear people share their stories, and it's sad and it's tragic. But you know, with me, I can't share like a similar thing. Like I can nitpick bad things that happened to me in my life, but none of them really drove me towards like Dhamma or spirituality or anything like that. You know, when I started really getting into spirituality is when I was at the peak of my youth, like in the suttas, right? Like good hair. And they say like all the stuff that they say in the suttas, like black long hair, but I didn't have black long hair. It was short black hair. Yeah. So like I had this image, you know, my whole life of like the ideal that I wanted to be, right? Like physically fit, 6-pack, you know, like nice clothing, suited and booted, as my friend would say, and have a nice convertible car and have a good career and, you know, travel and party in different places and, you know, living the dream, YOLO, all the kind of, you know, sayings that we have in our culture. But once I got there, like it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And then I was hoping that the next time I went out, it was going to be what I wanted it to be, right? Or the next summer was going to be what I wanted it to be, or the next car was going to be what I wanted it to be, or the next girl, unfortunately, was going to be the one I wanted her to be. But it never happened, you know? And all those things were nice. Like I loved dancing. I used to hit the club all the time, you know, and I loved traveling with my friends in the Air Force, and we'd go on so many adventures. And I was lucky to meet so many nice girls, you know, to have relationships with them and stuff like that. So I don't want to knock it either. You know, it was all very nice. I really have nothing I have no complaints unless I want to get petty. But at night when I found myself in bed, even if I wasn't alone, I would still feel like, wow, there's something missing. Like this isn't what I wanted it to be. It didn't turn out the way in the next morning. And it just seemed like tiring. Like you always have to kind of like look for these peak experiences. And that's what life was going to be about. Just like going after the next peak experience. And it's weird because they say like, oh, you know, it's because you never fell in love, or you need to fall in love and meet your soulmate or whatever. But, you know, there's at least 2 people I can think in my life who I was super deeply in love with. And I still felt this, you know, and that has nothing to do with them, that anything was wrong with them. It was with me, you know, I had my own stuff that I needed to deal with. So I figured like there's nothing out there, no one out there, nothing, no experience, no money, no possession, no title. There's nothing in the world that's going to be able to give me what I've been searching for, even though I couldn't name it at the time. I didn't know what it was. So I started like going to all kinds of like different places to search for answers. My easiest venue was going back to what I did when I was in high school, which was like reading philosophy. Because like the first book I picked up when I had some sort of like existential crisis in high school was like Plato's Republic. And then I just kept reading all of Plato's stuff. And I remembered a book that I read in high school called The Joy of Living and Dying in Peace by the Dalai Lama. And I was surprised when it's like the joy of living. Yes. The joy of dying. No, like how can you be joyful in dying? That's horrible. Everyone cries. Like no one wants to die. So I got that book and I read it and it resonated with me. And I was like, man, like Buddhism is the ultimate philosophy. This is what I want to do. But I was still too immature. I wasn't ready for, I was still looking for peak experiences. I wanted to reach the ideal. So then later on, when I did reach the ideal, I decided to go back and search again. So I went to like Vedanta centers, other like Hindu centers, Zen centers. I was really into yoga. I really got into physical fitness and thought like through physical fitness, I can like transcend, you know, which there's something to it, you know, mastering any skill can give you some peak, you know, yeah, some discipline can help you overcome the normal world and taste something outside of this world. So there was something to that, but it wasn't really holistic package that I wanted. It wasn't the total thing. So it wasn't until I went to Sarathchandra Buddhist Center after a couple months, I went there for a meditation session and there was going to be no meditation. I think it was Bhante Sanathavihari who told me like, oh, there's no meditation today. There's a Dhamma talk. And I didn't even know what a Dhamma talk was. He's like, you want to stay? And I was like, oh, whatever. And I stayed there and Celinda was there. So the people that are here, Juan and Joana know Celinda. Celinda was there. And she was asking this monk questions and it felt like she knew him, right? Later on, I found out that they've known each other for many years. But that Dhamma talk by Bhante Puniji, which I didn't know at the time, it just kind of went over my head, you know? I was like, oh, very fascinating, very interesting. But it was like none of it stuck. And then he was going to give another talk like a few days later. So I came to that one. And in that talk, Celinda asked a question to Bhante Puniji, like something like, what's the point of this? Or what's the purpose of life? Or what's the whole universe? Some, you know, super like existential question. And Bhante Puniji gave something like, I don't know the exact words, but it was something about just like living Dhamma, you know, practicing the Dhamma. And it hit me that time. Then I got everything. Like everything else that he said went over my head, but that I got. And I said, let's see if it's true. You know, I want to know if it's true. Like, is this right? So then I dedicated myself to Dhamma practice. Unfortunately, a couple of months later, I had to go back on another deployment to Afghanistan. So then I decided, well, I'm going to practice it out there. And if it works out there, then it can work anywhere. And it did. Like a lot of people noticed it. I even got criticized because I wasn't as motivated, you know, that I just should have been. And then I came back. I went on a retreat, and I had on that meditation retreat, something just clicked. You know, I got a taste of it, and it wasn't until someone pointed it out to me. So I left the meditation retreat, and then one of my friends is like, "Hey, you know, like something's up with you," and I was like, oh yeah, something is up with me, you know, like you pointed, yeah, you're right. And those few months coming out of the retreat, I was like on another level, you know, like we talk about like, we always use like Dragon Ball Z references, right? So like Ultra Instinct or whatever, Super Saiyan God mode. And everything was just working. I was just going with everything was happening in the best way it could happen. And I don't know, it was just an amazing time. And other people were picking it up on me. And another person that I just met pointed it out to me when I was in my travels. I forget exactly what she said, but she said something and I was like, oh, you're right. Yeah, that's true. So after listening to the Dhamma from Bhante Puniji, practicing it while I was in Afghanistan, going to this meditation retreat and having some sort of like experiential knowledge, understanding, comprehension, I was like, I just got to become a monk. Like, there's nothing else to do here. Like, I have what I thought I should have, and that didn't make me happy. And I don't think getting more of it, like getting more money or a prettier girl or a bigger house, or becoming more fit, buffer, and more cut, like, I don't think that's going to do it. So I was like, yeah, I need to become a monk. And the monks I told the monks at Sarathchandra Buddhist Center, and they kind of just laughed, like, oh, this silly American boy, whatever. and then I kept telling them, like, every meditation, right? I kept bringing it up, and they're like, oh, let's see, study the suttas. That's what they kept saying. So I bought all the suttas that Bhikkhu Bodhi translated, and I would take them to the temple. Like, look, I'm reading this one. Look, I'm reading that. Like, showing them, like, here's the book. I'm actually doing the homework. So after some time, then finally, I was bringing Bhante Kolita to Palmdale Temple that we have for a ceremony, but I had a bad stomach ache, but I kept a promise to Bhante that I would bring him. And I had my little sports car, the convertible, right? So I'm just jamming out here, like, and he was all like, I could tell he was uncomfortable. He was a little nervous. I was driving. And he knew I was in the Air Force, and he knew that I was a party guy. I was completely honest with him. I didn't hide any. There was no shame in my game. And he turned to me and he says, you can come and stay now if you like. So then I had to get out of the Air Force, break up with my girlfriend and do all this other stuff that you don't think you have to do in order to step out of the system. And yeah, so then I became ordained. And since then, I've just been following the Dhamma. But I guess, yeah, I don't know. Any specific other things that you'd like to know?
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that far. Yeah, I remember I knew you right before you became a monk. I had so much fun. We would go to my place and watch the UFC fights and the the WWE WrestleMania and Royal Rumbles. So it was a good time. And I saw that transition. You had stopped drinking, and you would even make excuses to your friends saying that you're just cutting weight just so that they wouldn't think it's weird. But how was that transition? Like you mentioned like casually, like breaking up with my girlfriend, which usually breakups are like a huge deal in people's lives. How was that experience?
Yeah, so I just kind of like, by the way, this and that, right? No, but obviously there was a lot of drama and emotion behind everything. So like, I come from a military family. My dad was in the Marines. He fought in World War II. He was in the Battle of Guadalcanal. If you ever seen the movie called Wind Talkers, like, he was there. He was injured. My father had PTSD. My uncles were in the Navy during World War II. My brother was in Panama and the Persian Gulf the first time around in the 90s. So to me, ever since I was a little boy, I always wanted to be like a soldier, a warrior, a Katia, right? Katia family. So, thinking about leaving the Air Force was something completely radical, like that was supposed to be my life, like, yeah, especially because of my family, keeping the tradition, right? And then since my dad passed away while I was still in the Air Force, that's all he knew me, right? So I kind of felt this kind of like sense of like, oh, I need to keep it going because he thought I was going to reach a certain level in the military and stuff like that. So it wasn't an easy thing to do, but I was thinking about the long game, and I was like, yes, it might be painful now, but in the future, it'll be happiness. Like how the Buddha gives the 4 categories, right? Of painful now, painful later, pleasurable now, painful later, painful now, pleasurable later, and pleasurable now and pleasurable or happy later. I didn't know at this time, but I was playing the long game. Like, okay, I might be uncomfortable now, but in the future, it's going to pay off. So that was difficult. Then also leaving all my Air Force buddies, which was really why I wanted to stay in the Air Force with my friends like Peter and Andrew and Danny and Chris and everyone. Can't mention everyone, but I'll shout out to all my homies out there still in the Air Force. Yeah, so that was probably the most difficult part of leaving the military because doing all the work is easy. No one wants to work. So that wasn't a hard thing to leave. Breaking up with my girlfriend at that time was difficult. But in the middle of, so I had already made my decision to follow like the spiritual path, but I met this amazing woman and she was very sincere and persistent. And I still had some time, And before I became a monk, and it's just like, well, let's just see what happens, like no commitments, but it ended up being a commitment later. But some months after, she pointed out to me like, hey, you're like stuck between, me, two worlds, me and what you want to do. And she kind of said it to me, like telling me like, go do what you want to do, And that made me realize like, wait, whoa, she really loves me then, right? Like she's telling me to go. Instead of how people think like loving means to try to possess, right? But it's really about when you love someone, you want what's best for them. So that made it even more difficult. But something happened, like I went on some retreat and that gave her some time to reflect. And she kind of like did me the favor of like breaking up with us, instead of having me do it. And so she did that. It was difficult. Yeah, I cried. I was sad and all that kind of stuff. It was inevitable. We set ourselves up for failure because we already know what we're doing, but you're young and, certain conditions, things happen and you just kind of like, you just see whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That was my mentality then. So yeah, that was difficult. My little sister, Ashley, at the time, I think she was like 13 or 12, made it very difficult. Why are you leaving me? Yeah, I was really close with her. Like I would take him to the movies. I'd try to incorporate him into all the things that I would do, trying to kind of be like a second dad to them, to like her and my smaller brother, Jared. My smaller brother, Jared, he was like, oh, do whatever you want to do, live your life. Cause that's what he wants to do. He wants to live his life. He doesn't want anyone to bother him, even at that time. But my sister, Ashley, she was very close to me. When I would go to Iraq and Afghanistan, she would write me letters, send me pictures, I even went to her school once and gave a talk, about my experiences in the military. So she was really close with me. She still is. Now she's an adult, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, so going through that, my mom, obviously, wanting what every mom wants for their kids to like get married and have a family and have a career and all of that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's difficult. It's painful. It's not something nice. But any kind of growth that you want to do in this world is painful. I mean, just growing from being a kid to an adult is painful, right? Raising children is painful. Having children for women is painful. We all know that, right? Like going to school is painful. You have to do all these assignments that you don't want to do and go to class and wake up early in the morning and do internships. And so regardless what you do in this life, there's going to be some work that's going to be painful, right? That you're not going to like to do. So taking this into consideration, I was thinking about the future goal, like supreme happiness, supreme, liberation, freedom from suffering. Or as I tell my kids in my Dhamma school, Hakuna Matata, right? It means no worries for the rest of your days. I was like, Hakuna Matata, let's go. So it was difficult, but I thought about the end goal.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a good advice for anyone out there doing this practice. I think you were fortunate to find the temple so close to you, even though you lived most of your life without even knowing it's there. So it's good to talk about the difficulties in becoming a monk. I know that you get praised a lot. And your name is Sanatha, your Dharma name is Bhante Sanathavihari, which Sanatha means like richness, and Viharis dwell in richness. So I noticed that you mentioned you had the life that you wanted to create for yourself. You had all the girls, you had the money, you had a house, you had a beautiful car that you really wanted. You shaped your body into its peak ability. And so you had I think you're rocking a really nice trimmed beard for a while. So like you had it all. And I can see that and notice the similarities to Prince Siddhartha. Prince Siddhartha grew up in a in a mansion, and not just one mansion, 3 mansions with one for each season. So he's always comfortable, surrounded by all his friends, because I know you were the life of the party with all your friends. Everybody wanted to go hang out with Ricky from the club. So you had that popularity, you had the pleasurable life, you had all the money, but like you mentioned, you still felt like it wasn't enough, or you were looking for something different. and you gave it all up. You sold your house. I'm not sure if you sold or gave away your car. You broke up with your girlfriend, and Bhante Kalita, our teacher, he always says that you showed up with a bag, just with like a couple of shirts and a couple of pants, and that's it. Yeah, a plastic grocery bag, maybe from El Superior or something. Oh, Vallarta, there you go. So like you literally gave it all up and took up the life of a becoming a bhikkhu, a monk. It's like living like an arhat, living like a Buddha. So you took up this super normal way of living, and you gave up what most people would think is hard to do. So these all our listeners who may be practicing, and maybe what their life may not be as good or as pleasurable as yours was, they still find it hard to give up. So it really doesn't matter if you have a lot or a little. It's going to be hard to give up, and I think the suttas mentioned that. So I'm glad that you can speak about the difficulties, because I'm sure like people pedestalize Jesus or pedestalize the Buddha. They might pedestalize you, like, oh, he can do it because he's super normal. But you showed there that it wasn't a breeze. There was some difficulties there, and you had the bravery to follow and go into the unknown. I watch a lot of Star Trek. Like, you explored a space where no man has gone before. Well, at least no Latino Mexican man in his peak youth. So thank you for sharing that. Yes, Joanna?
I just wanted to mention how I find it I have this impression, Bhante, that before you became a monk, you probably imagined yourself being a monk first, like all the time.
Yeah, I think once I knew about monks, like I imagined myself even before that, because I used to watch like anime, a lot of anime before it was cool, and people would make fun of you for watching anime because you had to like order it from catalogs and VHS cassettes. So I'm dating myself there for all the young people that are listening. So I had ideas of like, Super Saiyan or the Avatar state, or, watching like Kung Fu movies, old school Kung Fu movies, like Jackie Chan movies and Shaw Brothers and stuff like that. So I had some idea of like some superhuman states that I idealized and I wanted to be like, right? So yeah, I guess there was some spiritual ideal that I was always thinking about, even though I didn't know about Buddhist monk.
Okay, so I think that's interesting because like even in sports, athletes, they have this practice where they visualize themselves performing before they actually perform for even in crowds. So, and then earlier we were talking about how whether if we're aware of it or not, our actions affect everyone around us. And we were mentioning how sometimes when we want to strive to become a better version of ourselves, or to grow as a human being in whatever it is that we want to improve in, it helps if we look at others who are doing others who are performing at the level where we want to be at. And we were discussing how even when we're not aware of it, whether if we want it to happen or not, people around us are observing us and we are influencing others around us. And I also think that I am very grateful that you are sharing the Dhamma with the Latin community, because I asked you earlier today, are you the only Latin monk at this moment in this world?
Yeah, I remember you asked me that. So no, I'm not. There is a Argentinian monk named Bhante Nandisena who started a place called Brahma Viharas in Mexico. So he's been doing this for a long time, and he was actually ordained here in the U.S. in California, not too far from us in Northern California. So he's been doing this for a while, and yes, there've been Latino monks within the broader Buddhism, right? In Theravada, I think it's been very few of us, and probably some of them have taken temporary ordination. I know a couple who've taken ordination and then given up robes. But as I know right now, there's myself, the Argentine Bhante, and three other Bhantes in Mexico. So there's at least 3 Theravada bhikkhus in Mexico, myself here, and that's the only people I have any awareness of. But who knows, in the jungles of Thailand or Myanmar or Sri Lanka or somewhere out there, might be some other Latino monks or Mexican American monks. So we don't really know.
Bhante, do you know if there are any Latina bhikkhuni women monks?
Good question. Yeah, there is. There's one here in California. She's a Colombian. I can't remember her name right now. But yes, there's a Latina bhikkhuni here in California from originally from or parents from Colombia. So there is Latina bhikkhunis.
Wow, I did not know that. And I was going to ask you, Bhante, today I learned that you are actually doing some research in a certain aspect about Latin culture. Can you please share a little bit about that?
So the research is like not to any particular ethnicity. It does focus on people of low socioeconomic status, right? But I guess you were saying that because it's so typical, right? It's so typical within the Latin community to kind of see this kind of behavior. So yes, as you mentioned in the introduction, I'm like a research assistant for this. It has a long title for whatever we're doing, right? But to keep it simple for everyone out there listening who is not into like all this academic stuff, is basically we're looking at the effects of women who have been with partners who are high conflict or, exhibit higher levels of narcissism or aggressiveness than other people do, from the subjective point of the women, what they experienced and how this impacted their experience of the legal court system of like, getting restraining orders, getting divorces, child custody, and all these kind of things that they had to do in order to, separate themselves from this partner of theirs, who are males in this thing here. So we're looking at, all these different factors. So we created a survey, hundreds of questions, very long. And so we just finished setting it all up and got approved for it. So we're in the process of actually sending it out. It took us a whole year just to, come up with it and word it properly and get all the proper questions and kind of have some people try it out first and give us some feedback on it and everything. So, within the Latin community, we know this as like, let's say it's pretty close to the idea that we have of machismo, right? And how some certain things are tolerated. Males are, we let them get away with it because it's seen as part of the culture, right? And then the things that, some women in the Latino community might be hearing as like their ideal partner or what a man is, are actually these qualities that are not healthy, right? And that are not safe. And how ingrained, I think we were talking about it earlier, like how ingrained it is in our community, or at least the community that we know here of Latinos and Mexican Americans, about how we let these men get away with it, how it's promoted, how we tell people to be like that, both men, and how we tell the women that, you just got to suck it up, basically, right? Like, and stuff like that. So yes, our research has to do with that, but it's not specific only to Latinos. It's focus all actually even there's some people in the study that are not from low socioeconomic status, although that's our focus. But there's like hundreds of people that are going to be in this study. But yeah, that's what we're doing. I don't know if you have any other questions about that.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Bhante. I just think it's very interesting because my personal experience working as a welfare worker at, and assisting with evaluating clients for eligibility for certain county benefits, I have interacted with a majority of low. How did you call it earlier?
Low socioeconomic status.
Yeah, a group of people who come from low socioeconomic status, and mostly I would say that at least 95% of my clients were African American. And I had the opportunity to work in the homeless unit where the majority of my clients, well, pretty much all my clients were domestic violence victims. And through that experience working in that unit, I realized that domestic violence, plays a very big role in African American culture. Have you had any insights into that specific class or into that specific culture through your research?
So yeah, we had to go through a lot of articles, right? You have to do like a meta, what do you call it, literature review, where you just gather a bunch of information. We originally started by trying to focus on partners of people who had narcissistic personality disorder. Everyone has some degree of narcissism, right? So we're going strictly by the definition of the DSM-5. But since we're only taking the perspective of the women, we were not able to, diagnose the males as being NPD. So therefore, we decided to just focus on what women's experiences in the court system when they're trying to separate from someone who's abusing them, right? So yes, within that literature, it covers, people of African American descent, Latin X, that's what they call it now, descent, Asian American. So it's not particularly any race or demographic. It covers all religions, everything. You'll find it everywhere. But I guess what we can say, some things that I think that need to be clear is that from my understanding, from my own personal review of the literature so far, according to this particular narrow focus of it and what I've seen, we have to take into consideration, one, that if the person does have a personality disorder, there is no cure for it. One, right? So this person has some sort of impairment or disability or illness, whatever we want to call it, depending on, how generous we want to be about using these kind of categories. No one fits perfectly into a category. We're just using it as convenience, conventional terms. So both on the side of the women who are being abused and the men doing the abusing, there is a lot of underlying issues of mental health, a lot of underlying issues of low resources, not getting stigmatization about looking for help, and other, how can we say it, other outside factors that are hindering and making life difficult for them, right? So it's not like, these people were born like that, 100%, right? There might be some factors that play into it. And it's not like we can say a group of people are like this, or we can't make any point to any one thing. But due to all these causes and conditions, these people became like this. And we can't say that, if you live in a certain place with certain conditions, it is more probable that you're going to end up in this kind of thing. So I think one thing that we need to understand is that these people are a product of their environment, right? Not only where they're in, but also genetic environment, all kinds of other things. So this is very liberating in the sense that we can stop moralizing, right? And stop calling people criminals, right? Not saying that they didn't commit a crime. People commit crimes. So there's a difference between saying someone committed a crime and calling someone a criminal. Calling someone a criminal means they're absolutely 100% criminal in nature, right? You're making some sort of metaphysical existential claim about them, right? Instead of saying, oh, it's a person who committed a crime, right? So it's like the difference between saying you're a schizophrenic and you're someone who's experiencing schizophrenia, right? So if we understand all these conditions that lead people, both the victim and the person who's perpetrating the abuse, I think we can address the issue in a better way than we do now, which is just incarcerate, punish, or moralize. I don't think that's going to solve the problem. It does keep people safe, I think safety is important, but it's never going to end. We're not going to get anywhere. So I think part of what we're trying to do here, at least how I understand, I'm not the faculty running it, I'm just an assistant, but I think part of what we're trying to do is trying to understand, what's going on here, instead of, how we see it typically in the news where it's viewed from like a moralistic point of view, or like we need to punish people, or categorizing a whole group of people by race, ethnicity, or anything. Because we even find this with people who are very well off, very educated. We can think about what they say, like cis, WASP. Like I think about all the main categories of what they call like people who are on top of the pecking order. It's there too. So you'll find it everywhere. But yes, there's certain things like not having enough resources that make it more likely for these things to happen. So I'm just trying to present this as trying to be as detailed or nuanced as possible about this, because what I'm trying to avoid is this black and white view that we have of the world of good people and bad people, us and them, or if they only did this, then they would be fine. Like, no, the same solution won't work for everyone, right? Everyone's unique, and it's going to require different things. But the first step that we need to do is try to understand the other person. That's not justifying what they did. And we don't have to accept or like what they did, but it's only through understanding that we can develop the tools, techniques, create the environment that's going to help us help these people and help our culture, because these people are part of our world. They're our brothers and sisters. They're our neighbors. They're our moms and dads and children. And, if we think about them like that, we can come at it from a more, Dharma perspective, compassionate perspective of as they are, so am I. As I am, so are they. Taking this into consideration, one shouldn't harm other beings. Juan knows that's like my favorite sutta from the Sutta Nipata. I always repeat that. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want me to say. I kind of like went way too into detail, I think.
Thank you, Bhante. So the reason why I asked you, Bhante, that question was because I noticed during my experience with working with my clients who were domestic violence victims, I remember once I had a client and she told me, I think I was interviewing her for something regarding her benefits. And then all of a sudden she starts whispering and she says, most Black people don't like talking about this, but like it's very normal for the men to hit women in Black culture. But whenever we try to ask for help, like if we want to go see a psychologist or a therapist, they'll criticize you. So I don't tell anyone and I just go anyways. And then I just thought that was very interesting how she was whispering. So she was actually embarrassed to share this with me. She was conscious that others would hear her. And there were a lot of other, Black women in the lobby at that time. We didn't really have much privacy. So she didn't want to be criticized by other Black women for sharing this. So I just thought it was interesting how she was hiding. She was ashamed or scared to be judged about the fact that she was seeing a therapist for her trauma regarding domestic violence. And yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, Joanna. So yeah, stigmatization is a big thing, especially like in the mental health. There's so much, right? We see scary movies that portray the people with mental health issues as the bad guys, right? like an asylum or a mental health place is considered like where, scary people are at, right? So yes, there is that stigmatization of mental health. There's also cultural taboos about like not going outside of one's culture or ethnicity or group or community, that whatever happens in the family stays in the family, or whatever happens in our community stays in the community. So there's taboos that there's certain things in certain cultures that stop people from getting the help that they need because one is not accepted, or there's some like bad view about it or something. So there's always limits in all cultures. I think mental health is one of those things that it transcends all races and ethnicities, where there's a stigmatization no matter where you go, so it's always kind of seen like within a moralistic perspective, you're seen as weak, right? Like you're not a real person, you're not strong enough to fix your own problems, right? Or like a betrayal of the family because you're going to ask someone else, right? So it's in Latino culture, we have something called familismo, which is a thing about like community together, right? And if you go outside, then it's kind of like a betrayal, looking for people outside to help you. So yeah, there's all these kind of different factors that limit people's ability to get the appropriate help, and that's very unfortunate. And I think that's something that all of us can alleviate by when someone tells us about something, we can be like, no, that's fine, like that's fine, it's okay, like don't worry about it, like you go get the help, do whatever you need to do to get better, right? Like don't worry about it, people are saying. So I think we ourselves have to be responsible for not creating more stigma and propagating these taboos, or trying to limit people because of some sort of like ethnic or cultural customs that have no real like basis in reality or like data or scientific evidence. But I think that has to start with us, because everyone has taboos. Everyone has something like, oh, that's not accepted, like we shouldn't do this. So every culture, every person, everyone has this. And I think that it has to start at home with us and our friends, and teaching them like, no, it's okay. It's okay to get help. You're not a weak person. You're not a bad person for trying to get help. And there's nothing wrong. You're not betraying anyone. Actually, by perpetrating those limitations on other people, that's the betrayal, because the circle of victimhood or circle of violence or the circle of suffering continues. This is not going to stop by itself, until we, solve it for ourselves. We can't try to depend that like something from the outside of the community or someone else is going to come and intervene for us. It has to be us that has to do something. So that's difficult, because you're asking people who are already limited, don't have many resources, are stigmatized, are limited, are people hold prejudice against them. There's all these things against them. And then you're telling them, well, you know what? Despite all of that, you need to do something for your own good. It's difficult. They already got too many things to worry about. So it's not a complete answer to it. Yes, I think people from the outside, we can do a lot, but it also requires something from the inside, from within whatever group you're in, to be able to change it, because you can't wait on others to do something for you. There's some, you have to start with yourself, and it's to some degree to be able to begin the process at least.
Bhante, I was going to tell you it just came to me, I remembered one of the most shocking statements she made. She said, and she was being very honest, and she said, I actually tried to tell, when I shared my experience of domestic violence, an incident I had with a past partner, I tried sharing it with one of my friends, and she told me, oh no, if he hits you, that means he loves you. So I looked at her and my eyes popped out of my face, and my mouth was like gaping open, and I was like, oh, wow. So like they really believe that, I mean, there's women who really are believe that if a man hits you, it means that he loves you. And that is why I feel that they're encouraged, or they look down on people who seek help, because to them it's like, what are you seeking help for? There's nothing wrong. So yeah, I just thought that was very it really helped me understand, because throughout that time when I was working with this clientele, I was like, why do they keep going back? Why can't they just leave him? Why can't they just let it go? Why can't they just why do they let them hurt them? And I was trying to understand, but now I see why. It's part of the culture. It's normalized.
Thank you, Joanna, for speaking about your experience at work, and what relating it to what Bhante specializes in now. You're going to Mount St. Mary's to do your master's in clinical psychology, right?
Yeah, it's called counseling psychology, clinical psychology. At the end of the day, it's to be a licensed marriage family therapist. So there's many different acronyms or titles that are given to it, but yeah, therapist, psychotherapist.
So it's interesting how, you're mentioning about all the cultural bias against going to seek mental therapy, therapy for mental health. And I don't know, I can't help but think that, you mentioned how this is an issue with all cultures around the world. And, last week we talked to Joanna about the Matrix. I believe we talked about it, or this week actually, because this is a second episode of the week. I think that has something that is seated within, what we call society is, Bhante Punaji always talked about society in terms of a normal state of unhappiness. And, we always talk about Buddhism as a supernormal state of happiness. And so to me, it's like society doesn't want you to get better. Society doesn't want you to deal with these mental issues. Society wants you to continue being, we can call it a rat in the rat race, continue perpetuating. So, these cultures that you're talking about, Joanna, these of the Black community, this has been going on for many generations, and same with all cultures. This has been going on for many generations. Even back to the time of the Buddha, there was probably these issues happening. So that's what I find interesting is why is this society not want you to look into mental health? Why do they want you to stay in this normal state of unhappiness? And that's where I'm so grateful for the Dhamma, because the Dhamma is allowing us to gain this mental health. And yes, go ahead.
Juan, you just reminded me. Yes, the Matrix is like whenever people try question society, they say, but why? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? Because you just do. This is just what we do. And I feel like through the assistance of Buddhism, we're trying to expand our mind, and we're like trying to push out of this net of like this way of life that kind of like puts us on autopilot. We don't really like the dream state. How did you call it?
Yeah, the dream state.
The existence, the dream existence, or
we're in the dream of existence.
We're in the dream of existence. So that's the thing. People, I feel like in society, people are discouraged to question society's ways. And like this lady, this client who said that her friend told her if her boyfriend beats her, that means he loves her. But she was questioning this. She didn't believe in it, and that's why she sought help. She had doubts, like you said earlier, Bhante, the doubts, the great doubt. And then that's what starts to open your vision. That makes you peek into the door and start asking more questions. So, Juan, what you just said earlier, you said...
I said that I find it interesting how society doesn't want you to deal with these mental issues. It actually wants you to pretty much shut up and do the dance it tells you to do. So, and this I really started to understand when Alan Watts would say that, most people who go through the education system and are told what to do, the normal goals of life, of family and getting a job and going higher and higher and higher, that after this education system, they always have to go seek therapy because of all the issues that, unlearn all the problems they taught. So it's crazy. I think now in our age, it's getting a little bit more open. I'm sure like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the young lady that you mentioned that was going to see therapists in secret, she may not even have had the courage to do that. So we are in a better age, but That's why I'm so happy with the Dhamma is that, when I went through my own, I went through a state of depression. I think I've told you, and I've told Bhante, especially out of high school and the beginning years of my 20s. And, my family's Mexican. They never brought up any therapy as an idea. That was never that. And then we weren't even religious, so seeing a priest wasn't even in there. So I had no avenue to seek any type of mental relief as far as my mental issues I was experiencing. But luckily I think what started to change is I met a teacher who was actually very, very nice, Miss Lana Prince. I think she listens to our podcast. I seen her like our posts when we share the episodes. So Miss Lana Prince, you had a great effect on me. She actually gave me the courage to go back to college. I asked her, hey, Miss Lana Prince, do you think I'm smart enough to go to college? And then she said, of course. And so that gave me the courage to go ahead and try it. And that's where I took my Asian philosophy course. And that introduced me to Buddhism, to Alan Watts, to Zen. And that allowed me to go ahead and start my journey through this mental therapy, which this is what Buddhism is a type of mental therapy. We have the word bhavana. And I know you have that, your Casa de Bhavana, your whole movement, the website. Anyone who wants Spanish teachings, the real teachings of the Buddha, go to casadebhavana.com. And bhavana, is normally looked at as development, developing the mind. But we can also see it as therapy for the mind, So, and if we think, when we do this bhavana, which is basically introspecting, looking inside, looking at our thoughts, looking at our feelings, looking at our emotions, looking at the body, when we're doing this, we're becoming conscious of what's happening inside. Well, what is it that happens when someone goes to see a therapist? They're having someone help them do that, look inside. They're coaching them, yeah. So what does the therapist tell you to do? It tells you, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're thinking. Why? Because that's going to allow both of them to become conscious of what is going on inside, to understand themselves. Yeah. And once you understand yourself, you lose the self. No, that was a Dogen joke. But yeah, once you understand yourself, you start to lose the problems, which is the self. So it makes sense. So yeah, that's what I find interesting. I know we're talking about therapy, but I've always felt very blessed that I found the Dhamma and I was able to do this therapy, because I am completely changed from where I was back then. And I didn't have the fortune to see a therapist, but hey, I had the fortune to see the supreme therapist, the Buddha, and his teachings. So that's what I find interesting about that. Bhante, do you have any comments about how Buddhism is a type of therapy?
Yeah, so the Buddha is known as the great physician, right? So he's a doctor. Here, like when it comes to like mental health, we can think of like the only MDs we have for the mind would be a psychiatrist, right? But the Buddha didn't give like medicine, like drugs or anything like that. And he's also known as the educator, right, of human and celestial beings, the trainer of personalities. So he's an educator personality. What is that like, right? Like coaching you to be a better person, right? So, and then when we look at the suttas, people came to the Buddha for advice about fear and anger and all these kinds of things, right? So yes, Buddhism has a lot of therapeutic dimensions to it, therapeutic effects. But as I think like Bhante Puniji would probably say, is like the therapy beyond therapy, right? Or like the super mundane therapy, which is not just like, these things that when you read about psychology or psychotherapy in the beginning, how like Freud is attributed saying to turn the abnormal happiness in suffering into normal suffering, right? So here in the beginning, we can see that it was just really about getting a person to be able to function, right? So that's the, in general, we can think about therapy nowadays, just getting people to function in society, right? Not about happiness, right? So just for you to like go out there and go to work or take care of your kids and be able to do what you need to do. But, even recently, because of the humanistic movement, even within psychology and positive psychology, they started focusing on, those non-pathological aspects and trying to develop those even more. So, we can't reduce therapy nowadays to, what it was or what is attributed to Freud or what it used to be in the beginning. Now there is some sort of like more transcendent aspects to it, probably, if people are searching for that, right? If people want to do that. But Buddhism is not a therapy to make you like just function in society, but to help you escape from society itself and from the world itself, right? And it's transcendental in that sense, in that it goes past what society or what the world usually does or wants from you. So I think that's why there's been a lot of hype about like Buddhist-based practices within therapy, psychology, and this whole mental health realm. I mean, mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is a big thing. Even myself, I've been studying it for some time now, and I'm even a certified mindfulness based facilitator, and I'm about to get another one also. So they've seen the benefits of the practice of the Dhamma even within the secular therapeutic realm. However, removing something from its original context kind of takes something away from it, right? So in Buddhism, the teachings of the Buddha, like mindfulness, were designed for specific things. They have certain goals, and they were taught within a certain context. So when you remove it from there, you don't know what you're going to get. There's no certainty that you're going to get the same effects that you used to get in the previous context, right? So that's something, that's a valid critique about moving mindfulness from Buddhism into the secular. There's also a big movement in compassion training, which was also inspired by Buddhist practices. That's also a very big thing that's happening. So we can see that they're drawing on a lot of Buddhist aspects, even like mindful living, or we can even say like minimalism is part of it, right? The Buddha says in the Karaniya Metta Sutta, right? Few duties, right? Simple and livelihood. Buddhism is always about just having what you need to survive. So yes, I would say that Buddhism is a therapy, but for people not to place it within the realm of what we typically think as therapy, but as like, some different, super mundane, transcendental, whatever name we kind of want to give something, for something that goes beyond the normal.
Joanna, what do you think about Buddhism as a therapy and how it's affected your life and practice?
Well, I feel like Buddhism is like a toolkit where you can use these different tools to help you understand your mind, to help you understand why you are the way you are, why you do what you do, why you make the same bad choices over and over and over again. And then, I mean, me personally, this is the way I would see it. I would ask myself, why do I keep doing these things? I know they're not good for me. Why do I keep doing them? How does my mind work? And me asking these questions is what always kind of like led me to try to understand psychology. So when I found Buddhism, when I found the temple and I started to see how meditation makes you go inside, I was pretty much trying to understand myself by going inside, by just closing the simple fact that you're closing your eyes when you meditate, that means that you're stopping, you're stopping the visual stimuli. So I feel like that in itself slows you down, because now you're subtracting all these distractions, and you are literally going inside, and you're no longer being stimulated by any visual factors. That in itself, to me, like, shows me, so this is what it is to really try to understand yourself, to let go of what's outside, to just shut out what's outside and really just be still inside. And it's kind of like a completely different world. So yeah, slowly I'm starting to understand that I feel like I'm coming to see Buddhism as a toolkit. And me personally, I have always wanted to really understand, why do we do the things we do? Because I would notice that people do things that hurt themselves. Like my clients, like, I asked you guys earlier, I told you guys earlier how I would question them, like, why do you keep going back to him? Why? Like, why can't you just let him go? Why can't you just stop it? And I think what I really wanted was to understand them. But I think that also relates to how I wanted to really understand myself, because my clients and I are both humans, and I understand that I do things also that hurt me. And yeah, breathing meditation, metta meditation, the suttas, they help me understand humans, how the human mind works. If you can understand how the human mind works, then you can slowly learn to master your mind.
Thank you, Joanna, for that. I think it's interesting. So you're saying to looking inside will have tremendous benefits in just relieving mental issues, and just by understanding how your mind works. And Bhante, you were mentioning how we can't really categorize this type of therapy that we see the Dhamma is, alongside with the normal therapies that people have and are utilizing. And I think you're right. So you're saying that it depends on what your goal is. And you mentioned how in society, the goal is just to be functional enough to continue on living your life, taking care of your family, going to work. But if that's your goal, you may not find the ultimate relief. And then Joanna, you spoke about how by looking inside and questioning, why do I do this? Why do I do that? That's actually the first step from going beyond the normal state of unhappiness that society wants you, where you're just functional. Because being functional means like going back to the same abusive partner over and over and over again. Why would you want to be functional and going back to something that's suffering? So I find it interesting, Bhante, what you said, Joanna, what you mentioned. It goes right hand in hand. And so we have to think about what is the goal of the Buddhist therapy, and that's to leave no trace of suffering left. So we have to look inside. It's a cleaning up project. I see it. I come from the Zen. I started from the Zen perspective, and they talk about Satori. We were talking about it earlier. We were explaining, Joanna, what Satori is, and Satori is like a glimpse into a state of experience that is free from suffering, free from worries, free from personalizing, where you see through the delusion of all these matrix of ideas that you've created to think it's reality. And it's this little glimpse, a little glimpse of freedom, complete freedom. And, but then, of course, as all things that are conditioned, you come back to their normal state. So in Zen, they say that the post-Satori work is like the cleaning up project. At that point, you're just cleaning up. You already saw the goal, now you got to continue and finish the job. So yes, Buddhism is a therapy, but it goes beyond the normal therapies in this world, in the mundane world. We don't want to go from abnormal unhappiness to a state of normal unhappiness. We want to go from a state of normal unhappiness to a state of supernormal happiness, freedom, free from emotional issues, free from pain, free from personalizing. And so, yeah, thank you both of you for covering both sides of this conversation on therapy. Bhante, I did have some questions. I know you're this whole year, this whole pandemic year, you've been diving into your passion, which is reading. I know you're constantly doing meetings with the Spanish community, doing meetings with the kids, doing meetings for even English-speaking Dhamma people, doing meetings with clinical workers, social workers, always, I always visit you, Bhante, and you're always telling me, I got a meeting this day, I got a meeting that day, I got a meeting. But how do you unwind, at least from what I can tell, is by delving into a good book. And, every day, every week I come visit you, there's a new book that you're diving into. And what seems to be the main subject matter of these books that you've been reading is the neuroscience aspect to these meditation practices. So I was just wondering if you can tell us a little bit of what you have learned about the neurological neuroscience aspect of meditation and the Buddhist practice.
Yeah. So, growing up, I wasn't a reader. I didn't like reading. I got into reading only when I was in elementary school, when into Goosebumps, like so many Goosebumps. That's the only thing I love to read. And then I got into middle school, and I just, Goosebumps were not cool anymore. They're for little kids. So I let that go. And then when I was at the end of high school, got into reading like philosophical books and stuff like that, and anthropology I don't know, I just found the anthropology book and I really got into it. But nowadays, my reading, outside of reading suttas and, Bhante Punniji's books and, we'd consider it more like, I don't know, like a Buddhist context. I couldn't avoid it. I couldn't avoid this theme about mindfulness that's out there, right? And how Buddhists themselves, whether Asian or Western, or want to say traditional or newcomers, however you want to divide it, it's not only outside of Buddhism that people are promoting Buddhist techniques or methods or meditations, but within the tradition itself is being promoted, right? So I was interested about the data, like the evidence, right? Because Buddhism is always about experience for yourself, right? So I found myself at times also saying like, oh yeah, like science says that mindfulness is good for you, and, meditation is good for you, and compassion is good for you. But why? Like, why is it good for you? How do you know this? Show me the facts, not because I saw it in the news or like it came up on my Twitter feed or something, like this scientist said this. Like, who is the scientist? What kind of study did he do? What do they mean by mindfulness? Does it have anything to do with Buddhism? So in order to do all of that, I had to get into psychology, right? And so I didn't have really any idea. As Joanna said earlier, my bachelor's degree was in religion, right? And I was tired of like doing anything else. So the one of the main reasons, probably the strongest reasons why I decided to pursue a degree in graduate school in psychology was because of Bhante Punniji, right? So when Bhante Punniji passed away, it kind of left me with this sense of like urgency and like, who's going to do the work? Like, I can't push it off on anyone else. And if I'm going to ask anyone else to do it, I have to be willing to do it myself. So I was like, okay, like I have to do it. So what I did is I went back to community college after already having my bachelor's degree and took all these psychology classes, to get familiar with it, and then got into this master's program. And at the same time, I'm in a very niche field, right? It's really about counseling, and it's really based on like talk therapy. Although we do, other things, we learn everything. I really wanted to use everything that I've learned so far in psychology and what I'm still learning right now in grad school to analyze these claims about Buddhist meditations, right, within the secular context and all this stuff, and even the things that we repeat as Buddhists that are scientifically proven or whatever, that we used to try to validate meditation or Buddhism. So this led me down a crazy hole, like down this long rabbit hole, like it's like a never-ending yellow brick road, or like Snake's Way in Dragon Ball Z. You know, like you pick up one and you're like, oh, that's good, but you know, it doesn't answer everything. So you pick up another one and another one. So it just led me, like, I've read over 100 articles on mindfulness, and I have, every time a new book comes out, you know, from like Routledge or Oxford or Cambridge about mindfulness, then I get it too, or any other kind of Buddhist meditation special. This is what really got me into like even neuroscience, right? Because there was some stuff in these studies where they would like about how mindfulness helps, or meditation, Buddhist inspired meditation helps deactivate the default mode network, right? It's like, what is the default mode network? Oh, in order to understand that, I need to understand, like, you know, physiology, like how the brain works, right? And all the different aspects of the brain. So then that gets you into like neuroscience, right? The specific study of the nervous system, which the brain is included in. So it's within all this context that I started studying, you know, within all these different domains of science, in order to be able to see if what we're saying, that Buddhism is scientific, or that some things have been proven by Buddhism, is just, are we just saying it because like we like to say it, because like, oh yeah, it validates our point? Do we really understand what we're saying, right? Or even like more from a more deviant perspective, like, is Buddhist meditation being appropriated to kind of like serve other people's purposes, which are more nefarious, right? Like, what's the point of this? Like, why are they telling you that 5 minutes of meditation a day is going to help you? Oh, so you can get back to work and work longer hours, and you don't ask for vacation and sick days and stuff like that, right? And why do they put meditation rooms in your office? Oh, right, so you can be more productive, not for you to be happier, right? So like, it was all of this. So I just didn't want to come at it like, oh, the Buddha said this, and, you know, you guys are distorting the Dhamma, or you're appropriating it. You know, I feel like to make a valid critique of all these things, which I felt uncomfortable with, or I had doubts about it, I had to go within the system, right? And understand their perspective, where they're coming from, and understand the studies. So this is what got me into reading all these books. Most of the books that I read have to do with mindfulness or meditation, but also obviously to understand that, I read books about psychology, psychiatry, neuroscience, sociology, like all these different topics. It takes, once you go down, like you start branching off. It's like when you get lost on the internet, right? You start off like with one meme, and next thing you know, you're like some crazy meme. You're like, how did I even get here? And you kind of like, you're disturbed at what you're watching at now. You're like, can't believe I'm watching this. So the same thing happens with these books. Start reading and start reading and start reading. So there's a couple things I would like to point out. Soapbox talk on mindfulness, right? Is there a there? You know, is secular mindfulness, does it provide anything? Is it doing anything? You know, the current evidence on it says, yes, it is doing things. It does help people the way it's taught, right? So one thing right off the bat we have to remember is that the way mindfulness is being taught now is not how it is in the suttas, right? So it's different. And mindfulness is usually being taught in this kind of like, let's say, group therapy context, right? So, you know, some of these benefits might just be from being in group therapy, right? Or I say this because when I looked at a recent study, then in 2019, a meta-analysis on the effects of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and especially it was mostly focused on depression. But we saw in this article, it states, the people on the article state that looking at all of these different articles and taking into consideration all the limitations of the study, that mindfulness does not outperform treatment as usual, right? Which would be mostly CBT, right? So cognitive behavioral therapy is usually what everyone uses, or DBT. Dialectical behavioral therapy. So it doesn't outshine them in anything. There's one particular niche in which it's been shown to be, you know, more effective than the treatment as usual for people to avoid relapse in depression. So within there, it has shown like, oh, you know, it's a little bit more special here. There's a little bit something, but if not, it's just another tool that we can use, right? But I say this because sometimes us as Buddhists or Buddhist people, or, you know, outside people who are trying to use mindfulness as profit, they try to sell it. They over push it, right? They don't really tell you what the results is. They're like, mindfulness is good for you. Everyone should do mindfulness. Yes. Yeah, but like, why? Yeah, why take it? You know, why take mindfulness over CBT? What's the point, right? So we can just say, well, for people that CBT doesn't work, they have hope that something else might work. That's completely valid. It's great. I think that's something we should do. We need to offer more people more tools to alleviate their suffering. But we have to be careful that we don't try to make mindfulness as such, the way it's taught right now and the way it's being applied right now in the therapeutic context, is like a miracle, you know, a panacea that's going to solve all the problems of the world. One, because it obviously has so many limitations and it hasn't been shown to be more effective than any others. Even like I looked at different anxiety disorders also, it's just as good as any other of them, you know. And then there's some evidence that for some particular disorders, you know, it's more harmful and not as effective at all as treatment as usual. So I think all of these things are things that we need to take into consideration. So most of my reading and studying has been to see what are the limitations of mindfulness, the way it's being applied in society today. What are the benefits also, right? I like to start with like the more critical aspects, right? to know what I shouldn't say. And then I can look into like the things that I can say. So that's mostly what I focus on reading outside of suttas, you know, because like suttas is the basis for my Dhamma practice. But I also want to make sure that I'm responsible as a Dhamma teacher, as a bhikkhu. When I talk about meditation, the benefits of meditation, the benefits of mindfulness, I want to make sure that I'm providing the person with realistic information expectations, right? I think that's very important. Instead of saying, oh, yes, you know, come to the temple and, you know, all your problems will be fixed, you know, stuff like that. You know, we have to give people what the evidence says, you know, if we're going to try to use it as a way to help them with their normal, mundane, physical problems. Now, if we want to talk from the Buddhist perspective and say, if you're looking for, you know, like spiritual liberation, some existential liberation, then we can talk about, you know, the Buddhist goal of nirvana, right? Nibbana. That's something different. But when I find Dhamma teachers or Buddhist people promoting mindfulness, they're not doing it in the religious context, right? They're doing it like in the scientific, their mundane aspects. They're trying to promote it that way. So if we're going to do it that way, we also have to make sure that we share the proper information. So that's why I do all this studying. I try to be very sincere, very honest, and about what I say, you know, and how I say it, and for what purposes. So I feel like and Juan always like he gets at me too, because sometimes I'm overly cautious, right? Like I stop myself from saying what I should say because I'm worried about, like, you know, what will the effects be? So yes, there's like a negative side to this kind of like critical analysis of what I'm doing. But I you know, as a Dhamma teacher, I feel I'm super responsible for everything that I say. And if anyone tells me that what I've said to them has hurt them in any way, then that would hurt me, you know, and I'd feel bad about it. I'd feel responsible to some degree for telling them those kind of things. So that's really why you see me studying all the time, because I'm really interested in helping people, or at minimum not harming them. You know, I don't want to harm. At least if they leave, at minimum they leave the way they came in, right, and not make it worse. So that's why I care about people. I don't want to hurt them. So in order not to hurt them, I need to know what I'm saying.
Yes, Joanna.
Wow, Bhante, that's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a lot of pressure, and that's how you live your life, right? You put a lot of pressure on yourself. Sign up for certification classes, sign up for any class you find about mindfulness or counseling or psychology. You sign up for it, you know, you put yourself under that pressure. But I think that's why you're so extolled. You know, people look up to you. I'm sure you get flooded with thousands of messages in Spanish and English of people with their problems looking for help. I'm sure you get flooded with questions from all the devotees from the temple. So I think it's very, very respectable of the type of quality control that you do with the Dhamma here me and Joanna are having a podcast. That's why we're called the Underground Dhamma Podcast, because we're not scholars. We're just enthusiasts of the Dhamma and have seen the experience for ourselves. So I will speak for myself. I appreciate the type of studying and the resolve you show in taking this academic endeavor. So thank you. And thank you for speaking about the neuroscience. I know every time I visit you, you tell me, get this book. It's amazing. And I think my Amazon wish list is like getting full from all these books that you tell me to get, but I know I'll start soon. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, and this is going to be a long podcast, folks. I don't see us stopping just yet. So the problem, if we look at this from a Buddhist perspective, the problem with mindfulness, and this is something that I'm sure you teach all your Spanish community, but the problem with mindfulness is that that's not the beginning of Buddhism. Mindfulness is not the beginning. You can't start sitting and introspecting and expect to solve the problem. It's going to be therapeutic in that you might lessen your suffering to a certain extent, but you won't be completely free from it. The beginning starts not with the meditation, but the understanding, and not just any type of understanding of like memorizing, this is the first noble truth, this is the second, this is the fourth, third, and fourth. No, it's actually, we covered this, Joanna, about comprehending the problem and then comprehending the solution. But one of the things that I think gets overlooked, and Bhante Punnaji always brought this up, is, when people got tired of religion, especially after the Age of Enlightenment during the 1500s and 1700s, people were done with religion. There was so many revolutions around that time, right? French revolutions and all the revolutions all across the world. People revolted against religion. And one of the issues with that Bhante Punnaji brought up is that they threw the baby out with the bathwater. And so one of the things that I think is extremely important is the value of goodness. The value of goodness. And before we can, try to solve the problem, at least once and for all, before we jump in to mindfulness meditation, what we in our tradition or our school of Bhante Punnaji, we call introspection. Before we start introspecting, we have to understand the value of goodness, which in Pali, the Buddha called it sada. Sa is goodness. So the value of goodness, I wanted to share, there's a synchronicity that I haven't told either of you. I've been wanting to share it, but I know I told you guys that I went to see one of the devotees from the temple, and she has strong conviction in the Dhamma and the Sangha, and our temple in North Hollywood, Sarathchandra Temple. She was she Bhante, you run a meditation Zoom class for the English-speaking temple devotees and meditators. And sometimes when you need a break, you might ask me to give a talk, because I know you're probably giving 4 or 5 talks a week at the minimum. So you might need a break, and I'll do a talk. And this devotee was there for a part of my talk, and she asked me to go to her home, and I spoke to her family. But at the end, once I finished, after talking for like 2-3 hours almost, the rest of her family went to their rooms, but I was there talking to her, and she asked me, like, what is it that I should start teaching my kids? What lessons, where do I start? Like, what should I focus on teaching them? And I was like, I don't have kids, so I don't know if I'm the right person to ask, but I said, well, all I can do is think about how I would want to teach my nephew, who's two years old, Adrian. What what do I want to share with him? I know we were just having coffee before the podcast, and we're talking about a tremendous influence, whether we know or don't know, that we have on the children, and how they're always watching and they're always taking anything we say, whether it's true or untrue, whether we're joking or being serious, they take it as reality, because all they know about reality is what we tell them. They haven't developed their thinking abilities to their mature extent. You don't really develop your thinking ability till you're probably in your 20s, and mid 20s at the very least. So all they know is what we tell them. And so I thought, what would I tell my nephew? And I said, I told her I would try to instill the value of goodness. Most people think that most people will say goodness is not doing what I want to do. Doing the thing that I find, doing what's right means doing what is unpleasurable. That's what most people think goodness is. Doing what is the right thing to do, the good thing to do, is what thing that is not necessarily going to make me the most happiest. That's how people tend to think of goodness. They have the word goody two shoes. A goody two shoes doesn't do what he thinks is fun. Doesn't follow the influence of the crowd that just wants to go after pleasure. And so goodness, the first step is that we have to understand that goodness is equal to happiness. Goodness and happiness is not antithetical. They're the same thing. Goodness and happiness is the same thing. And most people are dominated by their emotions, meaning they're chasing after pleasure and running away from pain. But expressing the emotion by chasing after pleasure or running away from pain doesn't really lead to happiness. If we look at it and use our reasoning, which I think the Buddha said that reasoning is one of the most important aspects in order to understand and know what to do. So if we use our reasoning and see and analyze what going after gratifying the emotions in terms of going after pleasure, running away from pain, that doesn't lead to happiness. And then suppressing the emotions either, that's not going to lead to happiness either. So goodness, being good, is synonymous with happiness, because being good means being harmonious and going after, instead of expressing the emotion and suppressing the emotion, is relaxing, calming down, becoming conscious, avoiding conflict. Yeah, if anyone wants to go into detail with that, episode 3 of our podcast, we go over this. But yeah, so I wanted to bring this topic up because, especially in Western Buddhism, where does Western Buddhism start? They start with meditation, and they threw out the baby with the bathwater, and they don't cover the importance of goodness. Most people think sada means faith. And when people think of faith, they think of like blind belief. But no, this is conviction. This is understanding. This is understanding the value of goodness, because goodness is synonymous with happiness, and goodness and happiness is synonymous with wisdom. If we think about how Dr. Freud talked about the id, the ego, and the superego, the id was synonymous to the affect activity of the nervous system. The ego was synonymous with the thinking process of the nervous system. And the superego was synonymous with what we call the conscience, or in Pali, we may call it hiri and otapa. So if we look at these 3 aspects, Freud said that these 3 aspects are in conflict, which is what causes the suffering. So he was very advanced in that thinking. And the id, which is constantly ruled by the pleasure principle and is going after gratifying the emotions, you can see, is looking for happiness. They're looking for happiness by going after pleasure. And then the thinking ability is dominated by the reality principle. They're trying to understand reality, comprehend reality. That is pretty much looking for wisdom. And then the conscience, the super ego, it always wants to make sure the id is not causing trouble, like a parent, watching their kid, making sure they're not doing what is for their own detriment. The super ego is looking for what is good. So Freud was trying to solve this conflict and bring harmony. And, he had his own techniques, the sublimation, which is just expressing the emotion in a socially acceptable way. But, that's just going back to normal unhappiness, right? That's why he wrote the book, Civilization and Its Discontent, because he knows to be civilized means to be discontent, unhappy. Because you have to follow the crowd, and following the crowd means not doing exactly what you want and just following the rules. And you're not really dealing with the problem of the emotions properly that way. So the Buddha brought the harmony. How did he bring the harmony? By satisfying all three activities. How does he satisfy all three activities of the id, the ego, and the superego? He shows how the id, which is looking for happiness, the ego, which is looking for wisdom, and the superego that's looking for goodness, how all three have the same goal if we truly understand goodness, happiness, and wisdom. So Bhante, I wanted to ask, what do you think about the value of goodness? And is this something that you're teaching the Spanish community?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you just even open a book that says Buddhism for Dummies, it's going to say the Noble Eightfold Path, right? That's the path that we need to follow in Buddhism. And it doesn't start with mindfulness, right? Number one is, doesn't say samasati or even samasamadhi or anything else, or it doesn't start with anything. It starts with samaditi, right? And I believe you've talked about samaditi before in the other episodes, so I don't have to go into a deep explanation about it. But that's comprehending reality. So once you comprehend reality, or maybe even get a glimpse of it, as we talked about it earlier in Satori, right? Then it's the cleaning up process. How do we go about the cleaning up process? So we have to change our values, which is samasankappa. The value, we have to, instead of wanting more things, we have to be able to let go of things, right? Nekamma. Then we have abhyapada, which is non-anger or non-ill will, which is to cultivate metta, loving kindness or benevolence. And then we also have to develop the quality or the value of, or we have to appreciate compassion, which is avihimsa, which means non-cruelty, or I like to say kindness. So once we value renunciation, once we value loving kindness, once we value compassion, then happiness, being following what's supposed to be good, being a goody two shoes, doesn't come in conflict with what you want, right? So because you care about others and you care about yourself and you care about harmony, therefore you will not hurt others, right? You're not going to do things that will bring you happiness, but at the cost of someone else or at your own cost, right? So not until you change your values, right? By actually understanding some aspect of reality, right? How things work out. Then when you see how things are, you're like, wait a minute, the way I was following before was incorrect. I need a new set of values. And you take these set of values. And when you take these set of values, you behave and speak and think according to those values, right? You cultivate them. And that's why you don't have bad speech, bad actions, bad livelihood, right? And that also why you want to clean the mind, develop the mind. So that's why you have what is usually called as right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So the meditation part is really something that comes near the end once you've established a firm basis. So even when we look at the suttas, we can see how most venerable Arahant Sariputta, right? Shariputra, for those in Mahayana, when he came up to the Buddha didn't say sit down and meditate. Right? That's not what happened. That's not what the Buddha told him, right? The Buddha had to make sure he had the proper comprehension. That was the most important thing, right? Also, when Venerable Sariputta came in contact with Venerable Asaji, Arahant Asaji, also Asaji didn't say, hey, you know what? Go practice meditation under the tree and you'll figure it out on your own. No, he gave him a message, right? So when we see these interactions with Buddha and other people or monastics, he doesn't start off by telling them to start meditating. He talks about the gradual path, right? So even in the Digha Nikaya, it's very beautiful. The Buddha talks about, first you need to trust the Buddha, right? That he is a Buddha. If not, you're going to not listen to anything that he says, right? So you take like a provisional trust in him. Like, okay, let's suppose this guy does know what he's talking about, right? And it's possible, right? So that's saddha in a sense, right? Too. There's a level of saddha first. So you listen to him. Then he tells you about the benefits of giving. There's where he starts. Actually, the Buddha doesn't start by even teaching like deep Dhamma, Four Noble Truths. He starts off by telling, hey, dana is good. To give is good. And why is it good? Because it brings benefits now, benefits later, benefits in future lives, all the good things, right? It's harmonious for society. Giving is good. So he tries to get people to notice that giving is good. Then he talks about karma, right? How karma works for the purpose of rebirth, so people can have a better existence. And then he goes into all the deeper parts of the Dhamma and meditation, right? But you're right. In the West, we don't start with, altruism. We try to start from the other side. We try to build like the third and fourth story without having the foundation or even the first floor. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't serve anything. Like you said, Juan, it does give you relief from some suffering. It has therapeutic aspects. It makes you feel better, helps you function. Yes, but you're not going to get what the suttas or the Buddha promises if you don't have the rest of the thing, if you don't have the comprehension, if you don't have the values, if you're not living according to what the Buddha is teaching. Those things are things that are going to help. They're causes and conditions that are going to help your meditation get better. So if you don't take these other aspects into practice, you're always going to you're going to reach a level that you can't get past, right? And you're going to become frustrated, and meditation doesn't work, or I'm not progressing, or blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go from one teacher to another. Instead of jumping from teacher to teacher, all the time, or looking for the newest meditation technique, or who's awakened and who's not awakened, or giving up on meditation, be like, hey, how about if I just follow what the Buddha said? How about I just for a couple of months, I start practicing generosity, and let's see what happens. Experiment, take the Buddha, put some trust in the Buddha that he knows what he's talking about, right? Test it out. And how? By practicing first generosity, dana, giving. And not only to monks, the Buddha said it's good to give to anyone, even to people who harm, criminals, right? And this and stuff like that. So it's always good to give. Always good to give. You don't have to think of like, oh, what's this person going to do with the help I'm trying to give them? That's them, right? That's whatever they do with it. That's their problem, right? So I think we really, really, really need to try to, instead of trying to look for all these mystical, meditative, deep states, which they're there, there's no denial of it. We need to start with the very foundations of giving and good behavior and values, right? All these very important things. And then, at the same time, even you can practice meditation, right? You don't have to wait till later at the same time, but you need to develop these aspects. So I think it's very important for us as Westerners, or people who weren't born as Buddhists, or people who are new to meditation, or maybe we did grow up as Buddhists, but we never took it seriously. And now we're coming back in, and we're coming in from the meditation side. We need to really understand the basis. And here, just want to encourage people a bit. If you want to understand this, look at the Digha Nikaya. The Digha Nikaya is really good at showing you the gradual path. It's very repetitive. Suttas are very long. That's why it's called Digha Nikaya, the long discourses. So there's long stories. I know it's not probably the easiest thing to read in the world, but the benefits that it's going to give to your practice in and outside of meditation, right? It's going to be obvious if you really dedicate yourself to reading the Digha Nikaya. I don't know, Juan, if you wanted me to say anything else about this topic.
Yes. Anyone who wants to learn the basics of Buddhism, learn it properly, because that's one of the things that really irks me is people who want to call themselves Buddhists but don't go to the words of the Buddha. They take the word of whatever teacher they're following. If you're going to call yourself Buddhist, you may want to do yourself the favor of seeing what the Buddha said. And, at my work, I had a friend who's recently started learning about Buddhism. He got interested and he started joining our Zoom meetings. And I'm so happy that, I told him, I told him, if you go listen to the words of the Buddha. And he said that he wanted to learn all the other types of Buddhism. I said, that's fine. Perfect. You should. But learn the words of the Buddha first, then you can go and see for yourself all the traditions, see what suits you the best, who you think is going to help you solve this problem, because we all have a problem. So yes, if anyone wants to know what the Buddha said and you want to learn from beginning to start the basics, then yes, the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses of the Buddha, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi has a translation of the actually, I think it's Maurice Walsh that does the Digha Nikaya, if I'm not mistaken. One of those two. It's a big green book, thick, lots of great stories. If you want some if you like the supernormal aspects of Buddhism, there's lots of stories of devas, angels, or aliens, as some people can call them, not to scare anyone away. Yes, angels and aliens. I'm sure that sounds like a History Channel show or something, but yeah, so go read the Digha Nikaya. Joanna, did you have any comments about the goodness? No, I think you understand then. Yes, so one moment. So yes, the synchronicity I was mentioning. If I could please see that notebook, Joanna, thank you. So, this devotee, Miss Gayani, who is extremely generous, extremely kind, which is something I've always noticed going to the temple, is that the kindness and generosity of the Sri Lankan people. So obviously they do know the value of goodness. But it's funny that when she asked me, what should she start teaching her kids, or what lesson is the important thing to start teaching them, the young generation, and I mentioned the value of goodness. Well, what I found very interesting, because me and Joanna always talk about synchronicities. We always like to point them out, because there's just, at this point, there's too many. There's too many for it to just be a coincidence, as the normal person will say. We joke that Robert Anton Wilson says that the materialist always says their mantra, which is, it was only a coincidence. It was only a coincidence. And Bhante, I know in your life, there's way too many synchronicities to count. And you love to share it with us. And yeah, so I find synchronicity so interesting. So I told her that goodness, we have to teach the value of goodness, and that goodness is equal to happiness and wisdom. Well, when I was leaving, very kind, she gave me some gifts, a Buddha statue, envelope with some money. And she also gave me something to give to Bhante Sanathavihari, which I haven't even told them. But when I saw what it was, I was like, oh, this is very interesting, very cool. And I got home, and then I looked at it again. I'm like, oh my God, like this. I told her that the main thing to teach is the value of goodness. And what she had me give Bhante Sanathavihari is a children's book that teaches the Karaniya Metta Sutta. And it has these beautiful drawings and stories. And it goes step by step, teaching all the words, every word. And it has examples for every word. And so it's hilarious. She asked, what should she teach the kids? And then she gave me a book called literally Karaniya Metta Sutta, which the first line, Bhante, what is the first line? Karaniya Atta Kusalena? Karaniya Mata Kusalena. Atta is goodness, the highest goodness. And so what should be done by one who knows the value of goodness? That's literally what the first line of this Karaniya Metta Sutta. And not only that, she gave this to you so that you can be able to teach the children. So she asked me, what should she teach the children? And I gave her the answer, but she already had the answer in her hands. It's hilarious. These synchronicities are hilarious. Life is so weird, much more weirder than we understand, much more weirder than we can perceive. And I just love that. So yes, that was the synchronicity I wanted to share. But now, as we've been talking for a long time, and if anyone's still listening out there, I know you're a real one. So I do want to pass the mic to Joanna, just in case we can ask any more questions for Bhante. We're not every episode that we have practicing Buddhist bhikkhu. So please, Joanna.
Oh, so Bhante, what do you? I feel like earlier you were saying that you're educating yourself because you want to make sure you give people the right answers. And then I said, that's a lot of pressure. But then I tried to put myself in your shoes, and then I realized why. Because me personally, I feel like I would respect you even without all those titles. But now I understand, after putting myself in your shoes, I understand why. Because like you said, you want to give people the best advice. You don't want to misguide anyone. And that is a lot of pressure, because if I imagine myself as a monk, I would want to make sure I give people the right answers, because people ask you a lot of things. And I'm sure there's moments where people ask you questions that you don't have the answer to. And what do you do, Bhante?
Yeah. So yeah, it's true. People come with all types of questions. Some questions that I've never even thought of, right? Or some situations that I've never even thought were even possible. I never considered. And yes, there's many times where I don't know the answer. And it's fine. I tell them, I don't know. What do you think? Right? So just, have them reflect. A lot of the process of like talking with people, having these conversations, is for them to reflect on their own life. They have no one to share it with, and they feel safe with the monk. So sometimes if you just give them the space ability and just sit there for a couple minutes and let them say it, they can come to their own conclusions, reason it out, right? Sometimes people are just looking for permission to be able to think for themselves. And, so a lot of these things you just kind of be like, so, what do you think? Like, what are your options right now? And they're like, well, I could do this, I could do that. And let's talk about, which one would be the best, or which one would be the ideal, which one could you do now? And so a lot of it is I try not to tell people what to do, because one, if it was just about telling people what to do, they would have solved their problems already. Because I'm sure so many people in their life have told them what to do in the past, right? Like, this is the right thing you should do. Like, and when people have told me what I should do, I'm just like, okay, whatever, thank you. So it's really, I try to let them speak for themselves and think about, hear themselves out. What are they saying, right? And sometimes I'll point out things, be like, well, that was a little like overcritical about yourself, right? Or like, why did you say it? Or why did you use that word? Or, why this? And then they're like, oh, I don't know why. Or because of this, right? And they understand themselves better, then they can lose themselves, right? Going back to Dogen. And the things that I do try to share with them is that's why it's so important for me to read the suttas. I try to share examples from the suttas that can relate to their situation, right? So I'll be like, hey, in this sutta, this and this happened. It's similar to your situation. Think about it. Right? Not you should do it, because it's not exactly the same situation. So it probably won't work exactly the same way. But I'm like, oh, in this sutta, the Buddha said this. And in this sutta, this happened. And in this sutta, that happened. And yeah, sometimes they want some sort of like scientific evidence for it, and I try to point them in the right direction if I don't know it. I'm like, like, I've read about this here. You can go look that up, or read this book, or read that book. Like I always telling Juan, right? Like, oh, this book's good. This book's good. I can list a whole number of books for people to read. So I'm comfortable with not being able to give all the right answers or to give even an answer. Why? Because I have accepted that I'm ignorant. That's how you have to start off in the Buddhist path. Realizing first that you're ignorant, right? Everyone's ignorant about something, right? Yeah. Socrates, right? Well, he knew something. He knew that. He knew that he knew nothing. So yeah, I think trying to help people is just letting them reason it out for themselves, trying to give them inspiration from the suttas, trying to provide resources for them, even like where to go or what to read. That's a big part of it. And as I said, we start from ignorance. You know, it's very important that we take a humble approach, right? That we don't presume that we know it all. So when you come into the Dhamma, you don't have to completely abandon all your beliefs, but you have to put them to the side for a minute, right? Like, I'm going to suspend judgment and put myself to the side. And you know what? Maybe I don't know anything. Maybe everything that I know is wrong. Open your mind and then try it out. So I'm comfortable with saying that I'm ignorant because I don't know anything about like any kind of engineering. I don't know anything about like, you know, how to make stuff through chemistry, or there's so many things in the world. There's no way you can know everything. So everyone's ignorant about something, right? We think that ignorance is like an insult. It just means lack of knowledge. Everyone has lack of knowledge to some degree, right? I know in Spanish is particularly strong word, right? Eres un ignorante. Like, oh, wow, you know, it's an insult. But I tell people in the Spanish group, when people tell you that, I'd be like, yes, it's true, you know, and then give them examples about things that you don't know, right? And then they'll kind of, it'll disarm them, right? And it kind of just flips the situation from antagonistic one to where the other person gets disarmed. They're like, wait a minute, what's this person? They're like, you know, kind of using this strategy against me, de-arming them. So yes, we have to take a humble approach. I accept that I'm ignorant. I don't know everything. I'm not an arahant. You hear a lot of monks say that. Right? I'm not an arahant. But so I just do what I can. And, you know, I don't pretend to be the person that's going to solve all their problems. I don't tell them that Buddhism is going to solve all their problems. I don't promise them that meditation is going to solve all their problems. I say, give it a try. See what happens, you know? And if it works out, then just keep going and practicing it more, like the Kalama Sutta, right? Everyone, like, there can't be a talk about Buddhism without the Kalama Sutta all the time, right? We can't avoid it somehow. If the conversation goes on long enough, it's going to pop up. So I think when we try to, you know, be in the right all the time, or being able to say something all the time, that's comes from what we would say like mana in Buddhism, right? Like pride. So there's three types of mana, three types of pride. There's the one like conceit, where you think you're better than anyone else, and everyone's in fear. I know everything, right? And I'll give you whatever answer. And if you don't know the answer, you feel threatened because of that, right? And then that's why a lot of people have to say something. Then there's the mana where you think that you're less than everyone. I'm nobody. I'm worthless. I don't know anything, right? That's the other kind of mana. And then there's the third mana, which is where you think everyone is just like you. We're all equal. We're all the same, which is not true, because everyone had different experiences, right? No two people are alike. So it's not the same. Everyone's not the same. Everyone's experience is completely unique. The important thing about this teaching about mana is you shouldn't compare yourself with others. You shouldn't be judging yourself according to others, thinking that you're better than them, lesser than them, or equal. Don't even look at others. Don't worry, you know? Yeah, there is no others. Yeah, I mean, that's what social media is doing to a lot of young people, right? Especially, they compare themselves to these people. And that's what's causing a lot of problems. Especially, I saw some studies, it really hits teenage girls the worst. Teenage girls are the worst ones to suffer from these kind of like looking online and expecting themselves to look like these people who've been photoshopped, or who've had like surgery, or who have done all these things, right, to manipulate the photo to make themselves look good when they don't really look like that. And the girls think they have to be like this, some sort of, and it hurts them because they're not like that, or they don't have a certain frame, right? Like everyone has different frames, everyone has different bodies, like, but only certain ones are the most popular ones. So then they feel they have to be like that. So that's also part of this kind of pride of thinking that you need to either have the right answer, or have the right body, or have the right car, or the right anything. So we also have to accept that we don't know everything, and be comfortable with saying, I don't know, or not have an opinion about anything. I was listening to a talk by Bhante Sanathavihari the other day, and he always said, like, you know, people are so surprised when they ask me a question and I answer, I don't have an opinion about it. And they get frustrated maybe, and they might even get aggressive about it, or offended that you don't have an opinion. People want you to say something about it. They want to force you into a box, put you against a corner and force you into something where they feel comfortable with, right? And sometimes we just say, I don't know. I don't have an opinion. That's fine. That's fine. There's no one that's forcing you. There's nothing in reality itself that obligates you to have an opinion about it, right? Or to say something, right? When someone asks you something, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't have enough information right now. I'll get back to you later. So I think a lot of times we need to kind of take this position. I find, now that I'm thinking about it, I remember when I was in the Air Force, and every couple years they would do a review, like an audit of our organization, and to make sure that we're all doing our job according to procedures and following all the safety stuff and all that kind of things. And then the people who are training us to be able to pass that audit would tell us, if they ask you a question and you don't know, you tell them, I don't know, but I know where the answer's at. And if you give me a few moments, I'll go get the answer and give it to you. And you pass, right? Because it's about your ability to solve problems, not your ability to memorize the entire book, right? So if something happens, you know where to get the answer and you can solve the problem. They don't expect you to, like be some sort of computer where you store every word for word of every regulation. So that helped me get comfortable with it, right? So that big pressure's coming up, the inspector's coming up. This happens every couple of years. It's a big deal, right? But having that relief to be able to know that you can say, you know what? I don't know, but I do know where I can get the answer later, right? Or I can find out the answer for you. That's such a powerful thing, right? To relieve yourself of that pressure. So these kind of things that I've been talking about is what I try to use, when people come to me with these questions that I perhaps don't have an answer or a solution for them, right? Be like, okay, I accept it. I don't know, and that's fine.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. It's true. I don't know. That's what Bodhidharma said, right? The king tried to pressure him when he got angry. Bodhidharma once went to the Chinese king, said, the king told him, yeah, I built all these temples, gave to the monks, how much good merit have I accumulated? Bodhidharma says, no merit whatsoever. King gets upset. He says, then what the hell is the first principle of Buddhism? Bodhidharma says, in vast emptiness, there is nothing holy. And then the king trying to one up this Zen master, he says, well, then who the hell's standing in front of me? Meaning, aren't you supposed to be a holy man? Putting him on the spot. And he goes, I don't know. He relieved himself of all pressure. Nothing could trap him. Nothing could trap him in this universe. So I don't know is very powerful. And they've always said, there's a saying that I don't know is usually followed by something good, because then you find out, like you said in your test, you know where to go look. So yeah, thank you for sharing. That's very true, and that's a good way to relieve yourself of the pressure. So thank you. I guess the last question I have, as far as having you here on the podcast, is how have you found your life as a monk? Was it what you expected? Is it better than what you expected? Is it more challenging than what you expected? And I remember when you first became a monk, the question was, the understanding from what I gathered from you was, I don't know how long I'll be a monk. I'm not putting any pressure on myself to be a monk forever. I thought that monks, how could you think that? Like, I thought you're supposed to be forever. So I want to get an update, now that was in 2015. Now we're at 2021, 6 years later. Where do you stand on that?
I don't know. Yeah. No, but as Ali Watt said, you guys showed up here. You guys gave me lunch, so you expect me to say something, so I'll say something. I won't just leave you at that. So yeah. I know that so many times in the past I trapped myself, and I've seen so many people trap ourselves and be so idealistic about things, and I didn't want to make the same mistakes again, right? My mom always said I was necio, hard-headed, so I was like, okay, I'll start my holy life on a new path, So I said, I'll try it out for a year. I wanted to do more than a year, but I gave myself like a reasonable, a goal, short-term goal. So is the monk's life easy? It's not easy. It's not easy. Everything that you thought would bring happiness, everything that you thought was good and you used to like as a coping mechanism, basically you got to give it all up, right? You're not hanging out with your teacher like he's your best buddy and, just chatting it up all the time. He's your teacher, and there's like some level of distance that has to be there, So you're not gonna like, have a group of like best friends everywhere. at least not in the way that we understand it as lay people outside, right? So there's that. There's a bit of like isolation in the beginning. You feel disorientated and you feel alone, and that's something that it's just an emotion actually, and emotions are impermanent, and you see it rise at times and you see it go down at times. And the same thing with like lust, right? So like you see someone who's attractive, there's no denying that they're attractive, right? And you see the emotion arise. Now, do you let it fester and keep thinking about it, or do you go, okay, whatever, I know this will pass, it's just like some reaction that I'm having to this nice image, right? So there's the constant struggle of like feeling alone, feeling disorientated in a new culture, right? It's not like I went to a place where everyone was American, right? I was in the Sri Lankan temple. And the Bhantes did the most they could do to accommodate me, you know, and the lay people too, ridiculous level of accommodation. Sometimes I felt like it's too much, you know, because I thought it was going to be like some ascetic or something. But even then, you know, you don't feel, it's not easy. It's not easy. You see all your friends, especially at my age, getting married, having kids, you know, some of them making a lot of money too, and doing a lot of interesting things. And you're like, wow, that could be me, you know, like this and that. So there's this thing, but the underlying, and I've already talked about it right now, yeah, the underlying thing to view all this through is that thoughts, emotions, feelings, they come and they go, you know, like they try to teach you, if you like bring it back to therapy and CBT, like, you know, your thoughts are not reality, right? They're an abstraction, some sort of construction that you're creating. Some inference you're making about reality. Well, they might have even no basis in it at all. So feelings, emotions are like that too. You know, your emotion doesn't validate the situation that's happening outside, right? It might be, you might have not understood it properly and you're interpreting it the wrong way. So once you realize that no matter how panicked out you feel, no matter how sad, no matter how anxious you feel, it's going to end. Right. And then I think about the long-term goals again. Like, what am I going for Nibbana, you know, to become an Arahant? When you see it in that way, you're like, well, if I have to, you know, once in a while for 2 or 3 minutes, feel some like emotional excitement, that I have to kind of like just chill, sit down and accept it and go through it and let it pass, let it run its, you know, biological process in the body. And that's fine. Because I think a lot of times we make decisions based on this kind of like feeling of urgency that we have because of emotions, and we give into the emotions, and then later looking back, maybe not at that time, but a couple of years later, you're like, wow, like that wasn't a good choice, right? Or I could have probably I could stayed a little bit longer, or I shouldn't have said it that way. So just realizing that our thoughts come and go, our emotions come and go, the pain and always sitting with your legs crossed. I was not flexible at all. And I had to go to all these Buddhist ceremonies with my legs crossed for 2 or 3 hours. Horrific, super painful, annoyed that people would keep talking and talking and talking during the ceremonies, and we'd keep chanting and there's no end to it. And you're like, when is this going to end? What's wrong? All these rituals. This is not real Buddhism, right? And all this other stuff. And you get frustrated. Like, how long are you going to keep talking? I don't even understand. Why should I be here? I don't understand Sinhala. They should just let me go to my room. They're cracking up over here, everyone. But going through all that adversity is beautiful, because you realize, man, like we do suffer more in our minds than in reality. You know, it's more the stories that we tell ourselves, like how important our feelings are and our thoughts are, that causes the suffering. Because as soon as I got up, my mind changed. Once the pain was gone, I didn't think like these rituals are silly, or these people, like they just love to hear themselves talk and all this kind of stuff. And something, you know, maybe some feeling that I had of anger, or maybe some lust that I had, felt so strong at that time, but a couple minutes later it's gone. And then you're like, wow, it was so silly to be so attracted to that person, or to hate that person and want to imagine like punching them in the face if you weren't a monk, right? Like it just went away. And once it goes away, your mind becomes clear and you're like, oh, wow, it wasn't worth it. So realizing this kind of thing makes the monk's life easier. But you're going to have to go through all your baggage, all your emotional baggage. No matter where you go, you know, all this stuff follows you. You can't go to some mountain or to the forest. No matter what temple you go to, what teacher, no matter what religious practice you do, there's no hiding from yourself. You're going to have to face yourself at some time, or all the baggage, all the things that we call the self. There's no running away from it. So the sooner you accept that you have to go through it and there's no running away from it, the easier whatever you have to do as a lay person or as a monk or whatever you're doing in life, teacher, whatever your pursuit is, you'll be able to go through it with more grace. right? Things are going to be horrible and we're going to make bad decisions at some point. There's no getting around it, but can we do it with some grace, right? Can we do it to the best of our ability, whatever it is? People are at different levels of ability. So I think this is really my most important lesson in the monk's life. A thing that I like to share with everyone that I think, I don't know how to explain it, but I'll just say it and then you try to figure it out for yourselves. So I thought, that the most important thing about meditation was going to be what people usually call like vipassana or insight. And that was going to be the most transformative thing about my practice, right? Or memorizing all the suttas and knowing all of that. But on the day-to-day level, on my everyday experience and just in life in general, since I became a monk, I noticed that the most influential practice has been the Brahma Viharas. I feel that I can see in every moment, in every interaction, and when I look at my mind and when I look at how I've changed since when I first became a monk to now, that it's all really like mostly influenced by the Brahma Viharas, by practicing loving kindness, metta, compassion, not only in thought, but in words and in actions, and considering the things before I say it, right? And after I said something, thinking about like, oh, was that kind? Was that compassionate? I feel like that has like changed my personality. Like I can't even recognize the person who I was before because of metta. And I can't really think of any insight experience that I've had that has really changed my behavior to that level. I've had some really like wow moments, right? Like insight wow moments, like fireworks, like whoa, amazing. But after some time, like you just go back to being who you are, right? But metta's not like that. Like Brahma Viharas, the divine abodes are not like that. Like that's something that you practice and it kind of stays longer. And I don't know, it was a surprise because everything, most of the time when you hear about Buddhism, it's about wisdom and insight, vipassana, satipatthana. You're thinking about all this like transcendental, like arahant level things. But I think to get there first, at least you have to not be a jerk, and not being a jerk is a big, big condition for becoming an arahant. And I think that's like the first, the most, I can see it every day in every action. And Juan has got good laughs out of this. Like recently I was, this little kid tricked me, right? I was bamboozled by this little kid. And I just laughed it off. And Juan was like, what? Like, you just got duped, Bhante. And I was like, whatever. But that's because of my metta practice. I was like, oh, that was cute. Like he got me. I didn't have no problem because I wasn't worried about it. And another time when Juan was here, someone came and they were maybe a little bit rude, of how they came to the temple. And I was just like normal. And then Juan's like, don't you think that was a bit rude? And I was like, yeah, but I'm worried more about my own happiness than I am about like being offended about being rude, whether it was or not. And when we were building this little outside patio area, someone damaged part of it, right? And the worker who was with me, he got upset. Like we've been working all day and this person damaged it. And I was just like, no problem, we can fix it, da-da-da. And he's like, I know you're nonviolent, but I'm not, And I was like, okay, take it easy. He's like, I'm joking, but not joking. So metta has been able to help me not react with anger or aversion when difficult situations like being bamboozled, being insulted or disrespected, or even having something that you've been working on being damaged or destroyed, right? Something that you're invested in has helped me get through the situations with grace, right? Or even in the face of danger, I've shared stories with them where I've been in dangerous situations where it's just gone over my head. I didn't even realize I was in danger. Yeah, as a monk, I didn't even realize that I was in a dangerous situation because I was in this kind of like peaceful state. Not until later reflection, or when I tell people like, oh, this and that happened to me, and they're like, Bhante, that was dangerous. And I'm like, oh, you're right, that was dangerous. I should have probably, like not been as trusting or as naive, I say, right? I'm very naive about things now. But that's what metta has done for me. Metta has just let me give people the benefit of the doubt, but not in an intellectual way. It's just like, I don't have to think about metta. It just happens, I haven't perfected metta. I'm not at the level of, in the suttas, they translated in English as the beautiful. No way. I'm not trying to claim anything like that, that I'm always abiding in metta 100% to the most extreme. But that's what I've seen transform my life more than anything. And I try to balance my what people usually call vipassana insight practice. With my Brahma Viharas, it's not like I'm favoring one over the other, but in my day-to-day life, in thoughts, speech, and actions, Metta has really, really, you can see it. I can feel it, and I think other people notice it, and it gives a couple good laughs for other people too when they see me in these situations. So that's something I think I really want to push ending this, because I know a lot of the focus in the West is about vipassana, insight, becoming an arahant, like all these high levels. And yes, I'm reaching for that too, But I'm saying if you're looking for something you're going to be able to see the results everyday life, really, really consider a strong basis in Metta, and you'll be able to see the results in that moment, that next day, and the rest of your life, and you'll see it completely change who you are. I think that's something a lot of monks, Bhante Brahmavanzo, he's right, kindfulness. What is he talking about? Yeah, that was years ago. He's talking about loving kindness, right, with mindfulness together. Why? He knows the benefits of it. That's why he's the happiest monk, right, one of the happiest monks, always laughing, telling jokes. Who else talks about these practices? Oh, Matthew Richard, actually the happiest man on earth, right? He wrote a whole book about altruism. They scanned his brain. He was the happiest. He's always practicing compassion. So if we look at even our Bhante Puniji, he has such a strong focus, right, on Metta, Bhante Vimal and Ramzi, right? So, I mean, it's not something unique that I'm trying to preach. Like, it's out there, but I don't think it's hit mainstream yet, where people realize the importance of practicing this. And that's why I think when I read I think it's called Nalaka Sutta, the one I always talk about in the Sutta Nipata. For some reason, I can't remember the name of it right now. When I read it, it helped me understand why I have changed. I was like, wow, like, no, this thing, as am I, so are they, as they are, so am I. Wow, like, that's what's happening, right? That's why I'm so like naive or like joyful. I can handle these situations without being upset, because yeah, I get it now. I get it. That person is just like me in the sense that they don't want to suffer and they want happiness, right? And they are a result of conditions, and I'm also a result of my own conditions, my own experiences. So this is like my plea to the audience, right? Don't dismiss loving kindness because it sounds like soft, right? Lovey-dovey, right? Don't dismiss it. It's a powerful practice. At least in my experience, it has been the most transformative practice. And that's what I kind of wanted to end off with today. Juan and Joana, I don't know if you wanted to say any closing remarks.
Wow, Bhante, that was awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. So you heard it here, folks. The real Dogecoin is Metta, and that's where the value is. Everyone can practice it in everyday life. When you're from the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep, it'll help you in conflict situations. It'll help you in your own when you're having mental issues. There's nowhere that Metta will not be beneficial. So with that said, I want to thank Bhante for joining us and teaching us and sharing your experiences, being very honest and sincere. I know it's very rare that we have monks that are so sincere and forthright. Everyone thinks, usually a monk thinks that they have to be a certain way, but, Bhante has showed us the power of Metta and the power of I don't know. So both will help you navigate this samsara very well. So with that said, thank you everyone for listening, and may you all be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful, and may you all live with ease. Sukhi Hotu.